of the Uluru Statement from the heart. You see, foreign policy starts with who we are. We tell a more powerful and more persuasive story of Australia when we tell our full story, our modern diversity and the rich heritage of our First Nations peoples. It is a story the world is ready to hear. It counters narratives from countries that seek advantage over us. So I am pleased to announce today that if elected, Labor will deliver a First Nations foreign policy that weaves voices and practices of the world's oldest continuing culture into the way we talk to the world and in the work of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We will appoint an ambassador for First Nations peoples, and we will ensure First Nations peoples have a stronger voice in our engagement with the world, deepening their long-held ties across countries of the Indo-Pacific. The Uluru Statement gives us the chance to be a more unified nation, stronger and more resilient at home and in the world. And Australians understand why that matters. Our nation has not known such a vexing convergence of circumstances since the end of World War II. From Mr. Putin's illegal and immoral war against the people of Ukraine to a more expansionist and aggressive China in our region, the world has changed. Our region is being reshaped. This generation of political leaders has a responsibility in this reshaping to secure Australia's interests today and in the future. It is our job. We don't have time for more of the same. And more of Mr. Morrison means more of the same defence capability failures. More of the same, it's not my job to pick up the phone to the region. More of the same chest beating while letting Australia get beaten to the punch. And we are seeing the consequences of those failures. Just as we saw with bushfires, with the floods, with vaccines, with rapid antigen tests, now we see in Solomon Islands that Mr. Morrison's inaction has made things worse. The fact is, the risks Australians face will be compounded by 3 more years of Scott Morrison. More of the same excuses, the same political buck passing, the same political games ahead of the national interest, whilst our problems just get bigger. And the rest of the world trusts Mr. Morrison as little as Australians do. Australians know their Prime Minister's standing in the world is defined by his leaking of private text messages against a close partner. Australians know they're stumping up $5.5 billion for submarines that don't exist. Australians know that veterans issued warning after warning about the need to get people out of Afghanistan well before Kabul fell. And Australians know the world has changed and that China has changed. Australians want a plan to shape a better future for ourselves in the world and has that plan. We understand that security in the world means we must use all elements of Australian power, strategic, economic, social and diplomatic, to maximise our influence and deliver for our interests. We understand that security in the world means we have to secure our region, playing to our strengths with our Pacific family to address our shared challenges, including climate change, strengthening our relationships in Southeast Asia to uphold the rules of the road, shaping the world for the better, and working with our friends and partners to preserve public goods, give form to our values and solve global problems, making a difference on climate at home and in the world. And I will say this, as someone who has fought for over a decade against people like Barnaby Joyce and Tony Abbott, it is only a federal Labor government that will deliver real action on climate change. We need to bring together all elements of our national power to maximise Australian influence and to deliver for our security and prosperity. As our Chief of Defence has said during this campaign, there is a need for greater integration of power. That is what an Albanese Labor government will deliver. Stronger in the world and more unified at home.
Ladies and gentlemen, could you please welcome Senator Marise Payne to the podium now, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much to the National Press Club, to Senator Wong, to Laura, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I start today by acknowledging the shock death on Wednesday of the Honourable Samuel Deputy Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, a friend I had known since 2008 and worked with even more in recent years. His death is a great loss to Papua New Guinea, and I send my sympathies to his family, government and the people of PNG. These are important discussions here at the National Press Club. We are in the most challenging global period in many decades. COVID-19's economic and health impacts continue. Authoritarian powers are asserting themselves, seen in Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, a violation of international law that must not be repeated, including in our region. Strategic competition is intensifying and requires attention to ensure it does not escalate into confrontation. For the foreseeable future, our region and our globe will be characterised by change and disruption, and this will be the case whoever leads Australia after May 21. This government has for years recognised and responded to these trends, which has meant making both significant and at times difficult decisions for our nation. We joined the AUKUS partnership with the United Kingdom and United States. We have revived and significantly advanced the Quad with India, Japan and the US, which was abandoned by the Rudd government in 2008. We introduced the Pacific Step Up and provided important pandemic support in partnership with our Pacific neighbours. We have significantly deepened cooperation with our key partner here through both a comprehensive strategic partnership and our economic cooperation and trade agreement. We've also struck free trade agreements with the UK, with Indonesia and joined the CPTPP and the RCEP. We have deepened our partnerships with others in the Indo-Pacific, including through our ASEAN-Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, the first country to have a CSP with ASEAN. We've supported the Pacific in climate resilience and adaptation and in their presence and engagement at multiple international climate discussions. We've legislated to ensure state and territory consistency on foreign policy and for Magnitsky sanction reforms. And we've prioritised health, security and equality for women and girls in our region. Our approach, which we will maintain and grow if we are re-elected, is built on resilience, on relationships and on rules. We are increasing our national resilience by strengthening our economy and investing in our defence, security and diplomatic capabilities, while also supporting the resilience of our partners in the region. We know that strong, sovereign states are vital to the security and prosperity of all. We have expanded and deepened our relationships because a strong network of partners and allies increases our capacity to exercise positive influence. The sovereignty of our partners is paramount. We don't lecture them. We cooperate closely while respecting their sovereign decisions. We've advocated strongly for the rules-based global order because a level playing field is good for both our national security and our economy. Consistency has been vital. Under the Morrison government, Australia has not blinked. We have shown we will not bend to coercion. We have shown our friends and allies that we can be relied on to act in accordance with our clear values. And a re-elected Morrison government will continue to build our strength at home, including our economy, our security, our human and social fabric, and work ever more closely globally with others, particularly like-minded democracies. This is the best way to preserve our ability as a nation to make our own choices and the best way to protect our freedoms as Australians.
Thank you, Senator Payne. If I could open up, you've both obviously addressed a more aggressive China in your opening statements. We know what Australia has been doing until now about China, and we know what China's been doing. And you've just said, Senator Payne, that we've shown we won't blink. Well, what are we going to do in the next 3 years about China? We've got a complex relationship with them. It's not just a strategic one, it's also a trade relationship. What are we going to do about the relationship? And it's emerged in the last couple of days, for example, that neither leader has met the new Chinese ambassador. What do we do to try to improve and de-escalate the bad blood in the relationship? And maybe Senator Payne could go first.
I think the premise of your question, Laura, which includes the phrase de-escalate the bad blood, implies, in a way that I don't necessarily accept, that Australia has not done the right thing in terms of protecting our national interests and our national security, which is what we will always put forward first and foremost for our nation and our people. We will work closely with our partners, as we have, to secure and pursue the security, the prosperity, the stability of the Indo-Pacific region. But overall, we will continue to seek a constructive relationship with China. But it has to be a relationship in which our sovereignty and our interests are respected, and in which no party is coerced or subjected to pressures that breach international rules. So is the de-escalation that you talk about accepting a 200% tariff on Australian wine? Or is it accepting the coercive impositions on Australian barley? Or is it accepting one of the 14 points in the document that was handed to your media colleague, Jonathan Kersley, by the Chinese embassy? I've had a very constructive initial meeting with the new Chinese ambassador in Canberra, and I'm very pleased to continue and to grow that relationship. I have said at every opportunity that Australian ministers, foreign ministers, prime ministers, trade ministers, finance ministers, treasurers are open and available to engage with our colleagues in Beijing. And of course we are. But that opportunity has not been availed by the government in Beijing. And ultimately, Australia continues to indicate that we are open to that constructive engagement, and I look forward to it being taken up.
Senator Wong.
Well, our relationship with China has changed because China has changed. And we should start from that premise. And to be very clear, an Albanese Labor government would not take a backward step when it comes to standing up for Australia's interests in this relationship or in any other relationship. And Marise is right to point to the coercive economic measures. We put our view very clearly on that publicly, gave bipartisan support to the government on that. And it was a view I put, as Marise did, when we both separately met the Chinese ambassador. What I would say is this, though. In many ways, focusing only on that relationship perhaps misses the central point, which is the reshaping of the region in which we live. And so whilst we might not be able to change China and how it chooses to engage with us, what we can do is focus on building the sort of region we want. And we want a region which is peaceful, prosperous, stable, and in which sovereignty is respected. And that is why our position on the South China Sea, for example, matters. It is a bipartisan position of both parties of government, and so should it be. So my view about it is we should be very clear about what our interests are. The reality is, whoever wins government, and Mr Albanese has said this, there will be differences between Australia and China that have to be managed, regardless of which of us is the foreign minister after the election. And those interests have to be managed with very clear view to what Australia's interests are.
Well, if I could just have a follow-up on that, with just a 1-minute response from both of you. You're both basically saying Australia will not back down. Is there a marker that the Chinese can give to show their good faith in trying to improve the relationship?
Well, they could desist from the coercive economic positions that they put in place in relation to Australia. I think that's a position both parties have. They could comply with the decision of the arbitral tribunal in relation to the South China Sea. And these are matters which go to the rule of law, also the road for the region, which are not only Australia's interests, they are, but they're Indonesia's and the Philippines, These are positions which matter to the region.
And we've consistently raised the points that I commented on in my answer to your first question in relation to economic coercion, but also in relation to Australia's freedoms to protect our national interests. And they are, in our view, fundamentals. But in addition, we have been clear about our concerns in relation to human rights, particularly with regard to Xinjiang. We see further arrests this week, including of Emeritus Cardinal in Hong Kong and other freedom, democracy, I should say, advocates. These continue to be of concern. With great strength and with the rise of China, welcome by the world, comes also responsibility. Responsibility that other great powers consistently exercise in relation to the rules-based global order that has stood us in such good stead over many decades.
Ben Packham.
Thank you both. Ben Packham from The Australian. Senator Wong, you've been Shadow Foreign Minister since July 2016. How many times have you met with senior Chinese officials during your time in that role? And is there any problem with that sort of thing? And to Minister Payne, Scott Morrison said Richard Marles' meetings with the Chinese ambassador were a bit strange. But was your office informed about each of those meetings and your office cleared them?
Me first. I certainly went to China for a visit. I'd had to look at what occurred between 2016 and 2019. I think this term I certainly met with the outgoing Chinese ambassador and, as I said, met with the new Chinese ambassador, and we ensured we had a discussion with Marise because it is very important on the issues that we've averted to, whether it's the economic coercion or human rights issues, that there is a very clear bipartisan position put to the Chinese, and we've done that. I certainly in the last term met with the then Chinese ambassador to inform him that Labor would not be supporting the China extradition treaty despite being asked by the Turnbull government to do so. So I have met with the Chinese. I mean, look, we all understand why Mr Morrison is saying what he's saying. We all understand that, in the lead up to an election, things will get increasingly desperate and accusations would be made. But I just want to make this point, because there's been too much of this in this campaign. We are all patriots. We are all patriots. Mr Morrison and the Liberal Party do not have a monopoly on patriotism.
In relation to specific approaches from Mr Marles, my understanding is a small number of those meetings were advised to my office. It's not my role to clear them or otherwise. I would describe them as being noted, but a small number, certainly not the number reported today. I would say that it is important to be consistent, and that is certainly the approach that this government has taken in all of our engagement across the government. We know from reporting that Mr Marles has, for example, confirmed that he's provided a speech in advance to the Chinese embassy. I would not do that myself. In fact, I wouldn't provide a speech in advance to any other embassy for any reason. He has spoken favourably in relation to Chinese engagement. He's spoken favourably in the tides that bind. I'm sure you've read every word, Ben, of the Chinese relationship more broadly in the Pacific, and Australia's engagement as well. They are statements of the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the person would be the Deputy Prime Minister, on a record. They're not entirely consistent with the policies presented now by the Opposition, and I think it is appropriate to note that and to draw attention to it.
I just would make this point, and I'm disappointed Marise has joined in because generally she's made a mature decision not to in some of this domestic politics. I can recall very positive comments being made by Mr Morrison about China. I can recall very positive comments being made by Tony Abbott about China. Mr Morrison said China provides real stability to the region in 2017. I mean, let's get real here. We understand both parties of government understand the difficult challenges of the relationship with China. And I think trying to play politics with it in an election campaign is not a benefit to the country.
Do you want to say something more about that?
I think I responded in my previous answer.
Okay, Anthony Galloway.
Thank you both for the debate today. I just wanted to ask, I think we can all agree that China has not yet offered a major olive branch to Australia. The trade strikes are still in place. There's no dialogue at the ministerial level. If Labor is elected to government and a major overture is made, such as the trade strikes are removed and or Foreign Minister Wong does secure a meeting with her Chinese counterpart, how should a new Labor government respond to that olive branch in the early days of government?
Well, I think Marise made the point that the position of the government, notwithstanding some of the politics, has been that people are available to meet. China isn't going anywhere, and neither is China changing some of the positions you articulated. We would, I think all Australians would welcome China complying with its international, both in relation to human rights, in relation to international law, and we will continue to press for the coercive trade measures to be lifted.
Did you have a response?
What the question to Senator Wong? So
yes, but sorry.
Yes, you were entitled to a 1 minute comment on her. Answer.
Well, my observation would be that there is an open invitation, in fact, a sincere willingness to engage. I have corresponded on occasion with State Councillor Wong in relation to COVID-19, in relation to Afghanistan, in relation to the circumstances of detained Australians, particularly the circumstances of their detention and the need for it to be in accord with international law and detention requirements. I continue to do that, and I patiently await a response.
Next question is from Stephen Jedgetts.
Hi, thank you both for your time. We're in Canberra, so forgive me for asking a very Canberra-focused question. Would I be able to ask both of you, perhaps first Senator Wong, are there any key institutional barriers that you've identified in Canberra to the pursuit of effective Australian foreign policy, perhaps including within the Department of Foreign Affairs or between the interaction between the Department of Foreign Affairs and other agencies in Canberra, which you would seek to tackle should you become Foreign Minister? And Senator Payne, can I ask you,
It must be public service. It's all right, I'm not going to answer
They may or may
questions.
not regard themselves as institutional
if Senator
barriers.
Payne care to comment, she's welcome to.
Sorry, what was the last bit? If Senator Payne wishes to
yes.
comment. Look, I think that I've been clear that I think we need a greater capability within DFAT. I've been clear about that. I've also been clear, as I averted to my opening, and as occasionally I hope you read my speeches, I've said it previously, we need to get much better at integrating the different aspects of state power. Strategic power matters. It is enhanced and furthered, as the CDF said, I think it was last week or the week before, by the other elements of state power. So I do want more capability within DFAT, and I do want much better coordination between the different aspects of government. In one is an unprecedented time. I remember in 2017 I wrote an article for Australian Foreign Affairs, and it was 2019, and I made the point that the playbook of past decades wasn't of great utility now. It was probably a bit wordy for a National Press Club discussion, but my point is it isn't business as usual, is it? We face very different circumstances to at any time really since the end of World War II. And that the proposition that the world is changing and our region is being reshaped has to be, our laser-like focus across government. And we have to ensure we have the capacity and leadership to respond and deal with it.
Thanks, Stephen. And I think it is important, it's essential, that there are no, to use your words, institutional. We have strongest engagement between the key national security agency in particular. And we've worked very hard to ensure that is the case. That our and you're the one who started bureaucratic language, so I'm going to extend it a little further. What are known as interdepartmental engagements committees and such are very much whole of government to deal with the critical responses to some of the greater challenges that to make sure that when the table is prepared, that defence, home affairs and other key agencies are surrounded. I would say that I'm pleased to see that the operating budget of the Department of Foreign and Trade has increased from $2 billion between the last financial year to $2.2 billion in the next financial year, in this financial year, and that we will see $3 of additional funding to 2020. Posts in key locations, these are good indicators for what we are doing.
Connell.
Thanks very much, Senators. It's a question for you both. I'm not sure how that affects timekeeping.
2 and 2.
It must be there's a screen.
Yeah,
Okay,
so 2 and 2.
Perhaps I'll start with you, Senator Wong. A common refrain from leaders from both parties has been Australia doesn't need to choose,